All right, so welcome back to DI2, a continuation, the second episode of digital imaging, as it were. Um, basically, it's going to be run exactly the same way as the previous class. We're going to have every week we're going to be given the materials. You're going to go right through the thing. It's just more or less going to be a continuation of what the previous class was. It shouldn't be really any different. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I mean, it's just basically the same thing as what you would have seen before. Now, what I want to do is I'm just going to quickly. So, come on, bring it over here. Bring it out. Come on, let go. That's killing me here. You're killing me, Smalls. All right. So, we're just going to use my website like as per usual. You click on the thing. Okay. But just so you were aware, basically, the DI1 was 1 through 7, and it's not up here yet, but it will be in a second. You'll see DI 1/2 Class 8. So we'll start in Class 8, and then we'll just keep going on. So basically, there's just like 1 week off. Okay. So this week, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be switching gears, okay? So for the first 2 weeks of this 7 weeks of this class, we're actually going to be using a totally different program. So you're going to have to download a new program. And it's going to be Adobe Indesign. Okay, so not Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Indesign. Okay, and it's going to have a little ID, Investigation Discovery. If you're in the know, that's what I think of every time. I think of like ID, like the network. It's stupid. Anyway, you should have already downloaded Photoshop, obviously, for this course, and so thusly you also have the Adobe Creative Cloud through the school. So all you have to do. It's just open up your Creative Cloud, and you should just be able to install it from there. So, like, if you go, you should have, where's my Creative Cloud? So I click on my Creative Cloud here, and I'm going to skip that, and then you can just go to, it'll probably be in graphic design would be my guess. Someday my prints will come. There we go. And then you'll see InDesign, and then just go ahead and just install it, and it will install, and then you'll be good to go. All right? So you're just going to install it sort of like what you did with Photoshop, but you should be able to do it right from the Creative Cloud app that's always running because it's DRM, Digital Rights Management. Meaning that when you run the program, you have to like contact them to allow you to use it, which is sucky. Anyway, as part of the Adobe Creative Cloud, what you're going to notice is a lot of Adobe is basically kind of industry standard for all these different industries and things. So, for instance, if you're looking at like photo imaging, editing, and digital illustration, things like that, raster image creation, let's say, basically Photoshop is the number one. If you were to look at vector illustration, I know we did a little bit of it last, a couple classes ago. Photoshop's not the best one. Adobe Illustrator is. Adobe Illustrator is the go-to. If you look at web design creation, it's going to be Adobe Dreamweaver, so on and so forth. Okay, so what InDesign is basically it's a page design platform. So it's not really meant so much to create artwork in it. It's more meant to organize artwork inside of it. Okay, so where it really kind of gets its strength is in multi-page design. So InDesign would be used a lot for like magazines or like newspapers or that sort of thing, where it's a multi-page document, ebooks, things like that. That's where its strong suit is. So it's very, very good at organizing photos, like putting them where you need them to go, organizing text into blocks, and just generally adjusting type. You're gonna notice when we open it up, there's just a ton of tools dealing with typography. Okay, it doesn't create typography, but it allows you to adjust your paragraphs and the text and things in a much more robust way than other programs will generally allow you. Okay, so basically what it's meant for is you don't create the artwork in it, you basically organize it in it, and it's meant to be a multi-page design software. It doesn't have to be multiple pages. Like some things it's good for, like if you want to make a poster or something like that. But if you're doing one page, I would personally probably just go ahead and use Photoshop or Illustrator, depending on what kind of graphics I'm trying to create. So anyhow, that's basically what it's used for. If you're a graphic design person, you are going to basically use those three programs. You're going to use Adobe Photoshop for image editing, Adobe Illustrator for creating your graphics, your vector graphics, and then basically InDesign to put it all together. A lot of graphic design is basically page layout, and that's what InDesign does. So some of you are going to love InDesign, and some of you are going to hate it. I am in the latter group. I'm not really that big of a fan. I like to draw and paint and sculpt and do that sort of stuff. I'm not real big on design like that, which is funny because I teach the web design class too, but it's just, I don't know. Some people have a talent for it. Not that you can't learn it, but I'm not drawn to it, and I just don't seem to have a knack for it. So some of you probably will do great with this, but some of you might not enjoy it as much. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to make a video just kind of talking about things, and then we'll do the actual tutorial video afterwards, okay? So today what we're going to do is basically talk about page design. All right, so page design. A big part of a graphic designer's job is basically trying to organize information to make it legible and clear and understandable, which I guess is what legible is. So usually the first primary thing that you typically will do is employ proximity. And the idea with proximity is that the closer things are to each other, the more you assume association. So you can look at it like groups of people. If you see people and they're near each other, you assume that they are friends, family, significance, right? You assume that they're, like, someone doesn't just, like, rub elbows with a random person. So when you see groups of people, you usually think, okay, those are just different cliques, right? So there's association there. It's the same thing on the page. So, for instance, if I made all these things that are just presidents because I figured why not. And you'll notice that I did not check my my writing because it's Hiroj Washington. So make sure that you check your spelling. And these are pictures, so I can't fix it now. I mean, I think I might have the original InDesign document, but yeah. So you can laugh at me if that makes you feel better. I can't hear you anyway, but I still cry at night. Okay. So anyway, so if you look at the examples here, so basically, if I have this title here, right, I'm going to assume that title is, like, if it says George Washington, let's say, I'm going to assume that it's going to be about George Washington. And I'm going to assume that this text and this text go together. And I'm going to assume that this picture is of George Washington, right? If this was Ronald McDonald, I'd be like, well, I would think, oh, that's George Washington was Ronald McDonald? Like, I didn't know. You're going to assume that if those are together, that they have an association. I know it sounds really stupid, but a big thing is just trying to group items, okay? So over here, it's a little more subtle, but again, if we look at this list here, right? Okay, it's just a list. Now, if you look at the list here, as soon as I indent this, I assume that there's something different about this. These now have an association with each other because they're even just one tab. It makes a difference, okay? And actually, you're going to see later on, we're going to talk about alignment, and this is actually a great example of alignment. Okay, white space. So white space is huge, especially in, like, modern design. If you look at most websites, because websites and printed page are basically kind of, they follow more or less the same rules. There's just a couple of different, things you have to think about. But if you look at most of them, like if you go to any website, right, usually there's a big old fat image, and it'll be like a big beautiful picture, and then there'll just be like a thing, like a text in the center, right? Lots of room for that text to breathe. That's what people like. When you have white space, it's the same thing as basically proximity, but the opposite, right? So in order for something to be close together, there needs to be space that it isn't, okay? So white space, or sometimes if you're looking at the art elements, it would be negative space, right? There's positive and negative space. Positive space is the objects, and then negative space is the space around it. So white space is very important because, again, it can help kind of push association and make things stick out. So kind of similar to this up here. If you look at here, right, I got this list here. But notice that I took Bush and Obama, and I just did one more new line. I just entered one more time. And now you assume there's something different about these. These now stick out, okay? And just like proximity up there, the space that you put will make a big difference about how well it's going to read. A lot of times what you're trying to do in a design is you're trying to make something get emphasized. Like, I really want you to look at this, right? And then look at this, and then look at this, and then look at this. So if I were to ask you like, oh, I want you to make something stick out, the first thing you're gonna say is like, oh, make it big, right? So you make that thing bigger. Yeah, totally. If I had like a big, let's just say I had a big thing of just a bunch of text, and I said, you know, I want you to make one letter stick out. You're gonna like, oh, make it bigger, make it bolder, change the color, make it red. But and then you could say all these different, add texture, do all these different things, right? And that would make that word or that letter stick out above all the others. But if you really want to make it stick out, the most powerful way to make something stick out is give it space. If I had a big open space and then that word in there with all the other text, that's going to give it way more emphasis than anything else I could do, because it's all relative. So white space is huge, okay? You do not want to jam a million things into your design. That's a really common thing. I used to do it too, is that you try to fill all the corners and you try to fill the whole thing like you need to or something. Don't do that. It's okay to leave it open. And right here's actually a good example. So eye stops. You want to limit the number of eye stops, okay? And this actually goes again, all these kind of are linked, but right here we have Hero Washington, right? His phone number, this is a business card. He's the United States president. He probably shouldn't be because he doesn't know how to spell his name. And this is where he lives, okay? Well, if I instead use proximity, right, I can basically say, okay, well, United States President George Washington, those two elements, those should go together. And then the stuff on the bottom is kind of like the contact info, like where you would get them, right? So what I can do is make this much easier to read. This is much quicker. I can see, okay, United States presidents, that's the most important thing. Oh, well, that's important, right? And the next thing you would look at would be George Washington, or Hero, whatever, right? So, I keep wanting to say Jorge, but that's not how you spell Jorge either. So anyway, you would look at the thing there. But if this is a much cleaner, much easier to read, much faster to read, you get right to the point. As opposed, if I look at this, I have to look over here, look over here, look over here, look down here, look down here. And generally people always look up in the top left, right? The reading corner. By default, that's the first area they're going to look at. They might get drawn away from it, but they're going to go that direction. So this is much easier to see. Another thing that you're going to want to do is visual hierarchy. So the idea here, and I said it earlier, is basically you want people to look at something here, then something here, then something here, then something here. You want to have a hierarchy of what is important. And that's really important because when they're flipping through something, right, they're usually trying to figure out whether they want to read what is there. All right. So what they're going to do is they're going to look at something and they're going to look at whatever the biggest, most emphasized thing is. And then that's going to let them know whether they should continue reading, right? And then what they'll do is they'll look at the most important thing. Then they'll go, oh, I do want to know about that. That's close. And then they'll look at the next important thing and be like, ooh, that's even closer. That is what I want to know. And then they'll look even closer. And so you want to draw them in. Now you might be like, oh, I want to draw everybody into my thing. You actually don't, because that actually can hurt you. So for instance, for web design, one of the things that often happens is that someone will be like, oh, I want to sell puppies, right? Or something. So if you basically draw people into your site, but it's not like you said, oh, free money, and then they come to your site and you're just selling puppies, they're going to immediately move out of your site, right? They're going to click and go, oh, no, that wasn't what I wanted, and click back out. Now you would think, well, who cares? I want to get as many people into my site. It's actually bad because the SEO, the search engine optimization, what it'll do is it'll say, oh, that was wrong. And then it'll actually make you less likely to be found. They'll move you down in the hierarchy. So you want them to want to see your stuff because otherwise you'll upset the audience. You'll upset whatever system it might be part of. It's just not a good idea. So the hierarchy is very important. It also makes it easier for them to understand, what the information is that you're trying to give. So you can see here, like having color, like an image, obviously that draws a person in big. So does the text. So that draws you right off the bat. And the party affiliations would probably be next. And then I have a little bit of color here. It's not an image, so it's less interesting. But these are a little bit bolder. And then probably these, these might even be before that because the bigness of it, I think, kind of draws you in. And then basically you have, these things here. Okay. Contrast. So shout and whisper items. So the idea here is that you either, if you're going to make something stick out, if you want something to be there, Don't make it subtle. Make it very, very obvious. If it's subtle, it'll look like a mistake, and it won't be visually interesting. So one of the things that we do in like character design and stuff is that if you want to make a character visually interesting, you have more contrast in the figure itself. So for instance, like if you want to do a baby character, give it a really big head and a little tiny body. And the tinier the body and the bigger the head, the more like visually interesting. If you draw a cartoon character and like let's say it looks cartoony, but it's perfect like human proportions of a baby, it's not visually interesting. There's no contrast there. There's no caricature, okay? So you want to do the same thing, basically, in this sort of design, right? So you can look, each one gets a little bit better. So you can see, okay, this is a little bit thicker. That's, some things. And then this one gets a little bit better, right? It's a little bit more bold. And then, a little darker there. And then this one's even more because I actually inverted it, right? And now it's a lot more obvious, okay? So this is more interesting. It's got more contrast than the other ones. Alignment. So a big thing is alignment. Right off the bat, probably a lot of you guys have done this. I know I have done it, and I probably still do some of it. Never do center alignment, okay? The reason why you don't want to do center alignment is that it makes for weak edges and weak association. So you get what we call a rag. So a ragged edge. So basically, if you look on this side, this is right aligned, and that's fine, although I didn't even do a good job, so just got me. But basically, the ragged edge is the edge that's not lined up, okay? Now, this has two ragged edges. Now, this has association, like, okay, these two elements go together, and these three elements go together. Okay, that makes sense, right? Same thing here. But these do not necessarily have any association with each other. When you use alignment, it helps the eye draw from the one element to the next element, and then you also assume that those elements will also be associated with each other. So if you remember earlier, I was saying in the very, very beginning here, when I tabbed in this, by having these all have the same alignment, even though these each are a separate thing, that helps them all associate, okay? So generally on your page, you want to do all left alignment or all right alignment, because it will help the individual components read together, all right? So now a neat trick you can also do is this. So I have this text here and I have this image, right? Now, if I just did normal left alignment, I'm going to end up with a rag over here, and then you can see this picture is straight. So it makes a weak union. But if instead I did right alignment, now they share this nice column right down this gutter, right? The empty white space between two paragraphs. They share this nice gutter, and now there's more association. Now they're sharing a line. And if I had this go from one element to another, such as down here, it helps them all kind of blend together, and it makes it feel like there's a union. Constantly what you're trying to do is create harmony or contrast and harmony, or unity and variety. So you're always trying to basically balance that. You want everything to look like it associates and that it comes together, that's harmonious, that it's got unity, that it all belongs. But that can be really boring. If I did all white text, all black text on white stuff, all the same font, all the same size, it would have beautiful harmony, but it would be super boring, right? Like if I give you a sandwich and it's just a white bread sandwich, it's just two pieces of white bread with white bread in the middle, you probably wouldn't like it unless you're a really boring person, because it's boring tasting. But if I were to give you that same sandwich and then put red jelly beans inside, if you're my son, you'd probably like it, and then you want to put mustard on it. I made him Parmesan, and then he's like, "Can I put mustard on it?" I'm like, "Okay." And now he tries to put mustard on everything. He eats mustard packets. He's got a problem. Anyway, the jelly beans will make it much more interesting to taste. Now that might be too far, right? That's way off kilter. So it might be more interesting, but those don't belong, right? But if I put ham or something in there, then okay, you start to get this interesting thing going on. And so a lot of times when I look at design, I think of food, because food is you have to have this harmony, right? Like the elements need to go together, but they also need to have a little kick. You know what I mean? Like you got to put a little spice in there. You can't just you got to go. What was that? Amelia, or what was that guy's name? He used to go Bam or whatever. That guy. you need to do something like that where you add something, some sort of elements that, you know, make your tongue come alive or whatever. Okay, so you're constantly trying to balance those two things. You don't want to go too far off one way, and you don't want to go too far off the other way. You want to keep it interesting. So one of the ways to have unity, I went off on a thing here, but is basically to have repetition. So if you keep repeating a pattern, right, like you have things done a certain way, it'll make the different disparate elements seem more connected. So for instance, over here, right, we got a picture, same kind of quality picture. You can see this one's a little bit different, right? See how it's not black? So it doesn't associate as well as these ones, right? Even though this one's actually different than these two. But these two associate the best because they're the most consistent. But anyways, you got pictures, all the same size, all portraits, right? Busts. And then you got this text, right? Starts with this kind of thing, goes like this. They all got numbers. And then a really handy thing to do, like if you're doing a multi-page document, is to use these horizontal rules, right? So basically these lines across, or you have something up here, or sometimes, you know, you'll have a book and it'll have the title on every page, right? And then, you know, you'll have the page numbers. Sometimes they'll write like what the chapter is or what the author is or something in there, or they'll have like a frilly thing. I've even seen some where they have like a character and you roll it and it like is animated. That helps every page get associated, because that way when you're reading the book, you don't randomly go, oh my God, what book am I reading? I don't know why that would happen, but it helps each page seem more connected on top of itself. And right, so that idea of repetition and stuff. And also when people are reading the documents and things, it actually makes it easier, because once they understand the first thing, they can then, on the next one, they can more quickly grasp it and not have to figure out the system again, okay? So composition is just basically all the rules that we just talked about, but when we talk about composition, you're saying, you know, what is this overall layout? Like, how are, you know, how is this page? How's the position of the things? Does my eye move around it in a certain way? Are there lines drawing me this way or that way? You know, is there good association in different elements? Basically, just how the general layout of the page is the composition. All right. So what we're going to do for the what I'm going to do a tutorial about is basically going to be a magazine ad. That's what your assignment's going to be, and I'm going to show you that in the next video.